my name is Jess Unrein. My pronouns are V, ver, viz. Right now I work as a data engineer with ActiveCampaign. I've been there for about 4 months now. And this month is really special to me because it was almost exactly 5 years ago that I moved to Chicago to go to Dev Boot Camp. And it feels like it was yesterday and also like it happened in a completely separate lifetime. You know, it's just one of those things, Dev Boot Camp, and I don't know how many of you have done boot camps in general. It's an incredibly intense experience where you just shove as much stuff in your head as you can for a 9 or 12 or 16 week period. And when you come out of it, you don't even have any credentials or anything. You just have whatever is in your head, and that's it. And you have a desperate need to get a job because you just spent a lot of money going to this boot camp thing. So when you walk out of one of these programs, and I assume when you come out of a college degree program, my college degree is worthless, so I'm not sure about that. But it's hard to imagine that you're only ready for day one. One of the most difficult to grasp things when you first try to get your first job in a new industry is understanding the breadth of stuff that you don't know, because it's actually huge. And so, it's a struggle trying to figure out how to set yourself up for success. And there we go. And you can set yourself up for success by making things harder from the beginning so they can get easier later. One of the first things that you will realize when you get your first job is that you're not working on any problems that haven't already been solved before, probably. There are libraries or tools to do almost anything out there that you need to get done. And it's tempting to get bogged down in learning the specifics of those tool sets and figuring out what is the most cutting edge technology and jumping on that and really devoting your time there. And you really shouldn't. Even if you've used some of these tools in your boot camp or in a previous job or something, I encourage you to step back and try and do without, because if you know how to do it without, you are more of an asset to your team. It's always a good idea to focus on fundamentals when you get your first job. So I know somebody else suggested that you don't do this, but I really suggest that you use command line git and don't use a GUI. Some places still use Mercurial, sorry, pronunciation is hard, but some places still use that, but mostly places that you're going to work are using Git, and they'll probably be using GitHub. And I know GitHub has its own proprietary GUI, but the thing is, in the last 5 years, I've never used it. I've met maybe a handful of people who have used it, and so if you become reliant on this technology, you're going to be running into a problem where if you mess something up and you don't know how to fix it, your coworkers can't help you because they'll probably be using command, or at least be familiar with command line git. And if you are pairing with people who use a command line tool and you use a GUI, you'll just run into a clash that can really make your life a lot harder. And so that's one thing, but you don't always want to optimize for what other people are doing. So one reason why you should use command line git is because it'll help you understand what's actually going on. I know it's a joke online, you really only need to learn 3 different git commands and just do those over and over and over again. And that is totally a way that you can live your life, but, and a lot of people do. So if you become the person who knows how to fix a botched rebase, or if you're the person who knows how to cherry pick single commits out of a stale development branch, you're making yourself a valuable asset to the team, and you're making yourself somebody that people will come to when they have a problem. And that's definitely how you want to position yourself once you get onto a team. Oh, and people might call you a wizard, and I have a quick aside, this is why I have notes. A quick aside, don't call people wizards. And stop using the portmanteau auto-magically. And stop referring to anything tech as magic, because I think there's this myth of magic and talent in the tech industry. And if you're working on a team and somebody's really cool and they know what they're doing, they're not talented, they put in a lot of hard work. And you can do that too. And when we use this mythological language around tech and around the things that we can accomplish, we put people on a pedestal and we make it seem like it's unachievable. And none of this is unachievable. So don't shortchange yourself by calling what you do magic or calling your coworkers wizards. There's no magic here. It's all just tech. The next thing, and this is somewhat of a controversial point, but and I know people who really disagree with me on this, but don't use your ORM when developing locally for your first couple months on a job. So an ORM is an object relational mapper. It's a piece of software that'll take something out of your database and turn it into an object that you can interact with programmatically, and then save that information back into a database without you having to deal with any of the SQL. And this is really nice for working with things programmatically, but I think you're shortchanging yourself if you rely on an ORM from the beginning. You need to be able to jump into the database and figure things out and get your hands dirty before you're relying on an extra piece of software that does all the grunt work for you. So I mean, if your team is using an ORM in a project, obviously before you put up your pull request, make sure that you're using all of the tools that your team wants you to and you're conforming to the standards of whatever code base you're working in. But try and do everything in raw SQL first before you automatically jump in and use whatever ORM your team is using. And this does a few things. It stretches your SQL muscles, and you really get familiar with what's going on there. You get comfortable in your DB shell, and then you get familiar with your data and how things are put together. And I think it's really important to be familiar with your data, not just the abstractions of your data, and really see how things look. And this is somewhat of an embarrassing point for me to admit now, because I have coworkers here. But for my first couple years as a developer, I was weirdly petrified of logging into my DB and doing anything there. I don't know, my SQL was never that bad, but I would write Python to run the SQL. I just had this weird hang up about going actually into the DB and learning MySQL or Postgres specific commands, listing all the tables in a database. It took me forever to learn how to do that, and there's absolutely no reason I should have been scared of it. And so that's a piece of advice I like to give, is try and remove barriers between you and the data you're working with. And this is somewhat back-end specific advice, I guess, but really removing barriers between you and one abstraction layer up of what you're working with will really help you understand what's going on. And lastly, run your code early, run your code often, and cherish your error messages, and make sure that you're not connecting to production databases in local development. So when I was in boot camp, one of the most common problems that people would run into is they would run code and then they would write code and then they would be terrified to run it, because what if it errors out? It's the code yelling at me. I have this black screen with green text, and the yelling is red, and it's often in all caps. And so, I don't come from a software development background. I come from a nonprofit administration and music theory background. People generally didn't yell at me in that area of my life. And so I think people who are coming from different career paths and have a different standard for how people communicate and communicating with people rather than communicating with computers, you're not used to just being told you're wrong all the time. So it can be just a tricky thing to get used to. My code isn't yelling at me. It's not a referendum on who I am as a person. It's just information about how I can make my code run better in the future. And you don't want error messages coming up in production. And you shouldn't just be running a bunch of scripts willy-nilly if you have production database connections going on. But don't be afraid of just running things will fail and see what happens, and print statements are your friend. I guess just really internalize that you're not going to break anything, and you are not special enough to wreck anything irrevocably. Somebody will be able to help you out of your hole. So if you are committed to learning things the hard way in tech and intentionally making mistakes with the specific purpose of learning from them, you are well on your way to a long and fruitful career in tech. Thank you so much.